Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. US President Donald Trump has slapped heavy tariffs on goods from countries including Canada, Brazil, India and Taiwan with rates of up to 50%. A 35% tariff will apply to many Canadian goods and Brazil faces 50%, excluding some sectors. The China trade deal remains unfinished with the deadline looming. US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to push for a Gaza truce and address the humanitarian crisis. President Trump later urged Hamas to surrender and release hostages as the global hunger crisis in Gaza worsens. Russia launched a wave of missiles and drones on Kiev before dawn on Thursday, killing 16 people, including 2 children, and wounding over 100 others. Rescue operations continued through the evening, with over 1,200 police and rescuers responding to the aftermath. El Salvador's ruling party passed a bill to overhaul elections, paving the way for President Nayib Bukele to seek a third term. This follows a 2021 court ruling backed by Bukele's judges that allowed him to run again despite a constitutional ban. President Donald Trump sent letters to 17 major pharmaceutical companies demanding they reduce US prescription drug prices to align with those paid abroad. The executive order, signed in May, threatened government action, including importing cheaper medicines if companies did not comply. Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo held the first meeting of a joint oversight committee on Thursday, taking a step towards implementing a peace deal. The meeting in Washington included participation from the African Union, Qatar and the United States. Japan expresses serious concern over Myanmar's planned elections, warning that proceeding without the release of detainees could escalate public backlash and hinder peaceful resolution. Foreign Minister Takashi Awaya urged Myanmar's military to end violence and restore democracy. President Donald Trump has announced plans for a new $200 million ballroom at the White House, fulfilling a long-standing desire. The project will include a modernized East Wing and will be funded by Trump and anonymous donors, with work set to begin in September. Now our top story today. US President Donald Trump has unveiled sweeping new tariff regime that affects nearly every nation trading with the United States. Under the new rules, countries that have a trade surplus with the United States, which is most of them, will continue to face a 10% universal tariff. However, nations running a trade deficit with America will now be hit with a minimum 15% tariff rate. Defending his tariff policy, the US president stated the following.
You know, we're taking in literally trillions of dollars for the country. This is making our country very rich and respected again. We have, you know, I tell these people, and I say it as much as I have to say it, but every leader is at NATO, and I was in the Middle East with the 3 great countries, 3 great leaders. Qatar, you know, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and everybody said the same thing. All of the NATO countries, essentially, they said that we were a dead country. 1 year ago, we were a dead country. Now we're the hottest country in the world. Look at you people. We're the hottest country anywhere in the world. We're doing great.
Canada is among the hardest hit, with tariffs jumping from 25% to 35%. However, goods that fall under the US-Mexico-Canada agreement will be exempt from that hike. Senior US officials say the entire tariff package will take full effect in just 7 days. We're now joined by Dr. Ajay Jua, who's the former Secretary of Commerce and a senior economist. We're also joined by Gautam Mukherjee, who's a senior reporter. He joins us from New Delhi. And we're also joined by Dr. Sanjay Kumar, who's a journalist at the Korea Herald. He joins us live from Seoul. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us on the program. I first of all want to talk about India and the effects that this 25% tariff effective from August the 1st, which is today, and its implications. The move is in response to high tariffs on American goods and its continued purchases of Russian equipment and energy, according to the US president. Dr. Dua, what are going to be the implications that the Indian consumer is going to feel from these tariffs that start from today?
Thank you very much. I think it's more than the Indian consumer. It is the United States consumer who's going to feel the pinch or the heat of the 25% tariff, which have been announced by President Trump. The Indian government does not levy. Let me put it the other way around. That today our tariffs, which were 13.2% on the goods coming from the United States, now those have been hiked to 25%. So certainly there is going to be an impact of competitiveness of the Indian exports to the US. For each of the segments where we are a major player, let's start with, say, gems and jewelry, which account for about $10 billion out of our $85 billion of exports to the US. The duty on those is getting hiked up to 25%. The goods will become costlier for the consumer in the United States. Same thing would apply to our textile apparels, of which also we are a fairly large player. So
yes.
The duties now have to be compared with our competitors. Say for textiles, Bangladesh, Vietnam, and to some extent China are our competitors. China is probably not in a better place than us because the duty on China or the Chinese goods is still higher till it is brought down in the negotiations which are going on. For us, if it is 25% from today, for Vietnam, it is lower at 20%. For Bangladesh, it is still about 15%. So they will certainly enjoy an advantage. So the impact on the exports from India would be there, but I think these are things in the pipeline. We are optimistic that once the bilateral trade agreement gets finalized, sixth round negotiations for which are fixed in India on the 21st and the 22nd of August, that we might be able to enter into a deal with the United States. And at that point of time, the tariffs are bound to be much lower than the 25%, which we might have to pay starting tonight.
Yes, Dr. Dua, thank you. I wanted to move over to Gautam Mukherjee next. Another country which is an outlier here, Gautam, is Brazil. Brazil are facing a 50% tariff on imports, once again effective from today. However, this is where things are different. The US has cited political instability in Brazil and legal actions against former President Bolsonaro as reasons for this increased tariff. Brazil doesn't have a trade deficit with the United States. In fact, the US maintains a trade surplus in Brazil. What are your thoughts on the US president using trade to voice political opposition to what's going on inside Brazil right now?
Well, Brazil has reacted negatively to the business of trying to coerce it by 50% tariffs on the basis of their internal politics. So they are really not going to buckle under They are going to try and skirt around their trade with the United States, and the situation will be left open for further negotiations as the time goes on. But, they're certainly not giving in. This is not a trade matter. It is a political matter where Trump is supporting Bolsonaro and Lula, the current ruler, is saying that Bolsonaro tried to rig the elections, mount an attack on the institutions of government, and so we have punished him, and that's all there is to it. Now, this cannot, beyond a point, be forced into a resolution by the United States. It is something that the supporters of Bolsonaro and the supporters of Lula, the government and the opposition, have to sit down and work out.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Gautam. Please stay with us. Dr. Kumar, I wanted to move on to you next. Obviously, we've also had the announcement last night that Canada one of the US's top trading partners, the US is Canada's top trading partner, now will receive a 35% tariff on goods that do not meet the US-Mexico-Canada agreement terms. This is once again effective from today. This is an increase of 10% from the previous 25% previously imposed. What are your thoughts on the US imposing an extra 10% on not only one of the US's strongest trading partners, but also its North American neighbor?
No country is not affected, we can say, if we see the US tariffs, which ranges from 10% to 41%. And you are mentioning Canada. They also had been discussing for being settled around 25%, but this is going to send again shock waves. And many in Canada are looking at it as a retaliation. So, of course, for one country, it is a national interest, but for others, it is emerging as shocking waves, like shock waves. It is sending to many countries. And these tariffs are not just dividing US versus other countries, but it is also creating the need of some passivity among the businesses. For example, when consumers get affected, it affects the companies and in long run, the economies and countries. And when these matters get politicized, then average consumers start thinking not to purchase, which in long run, it affects the consumerism. That means the consumption it is going to affect too. So these kind of things are needed to be under discussion, but I don't know who are the advisors of Trump administration who are not thinking about consumption in the long run, because at the end of the day, it is going to affect the consumers. It is the consumers who are going to pay the price. And this kind of actions shape the worldview in a different a manner. For example, if you see the perceptions in New Zealand and Australia also, New Zealand had been 15% and Australia, I think it's 10%. So there is, again, some kind of dissatisfaction among the allies. When we see Taiwan and India also, there is like 19% and 25%. So, it looks like the whole world is playing with these tariff things, and for one country it is national interest, but others are perceiving it as a huge shock waves. Some look very happy, like Japan and Korea right now. They look happy officially. Their governments portray officially that yes, they have done at least something, they have got away with that, but public
Yes.
mood is different. But the public mood is very different. So in long run, for expanding consumption and facilitating the consumers, this tariff discussions must be concluded within this week or as soon as possible to restore the trust in the entire world. This is my comments on this.
Yes, Dr. Kumar, thank you very much. Gentlemen, please stay with us. We have some global reactions coming in now to the President Trump's latest tariff measures that have been mixed, with countries like Australia, Taiwan, Mexico and France expressing varying levels of concern and optimism. Australia's Trade Minister Don Farrell confirmed that US tariffs on Australian goods remain at 10%, marking a favourable position for Australia. However, Farrell emphasised that Australia would continue advocating for the complete removal of tariffs in line with their free trade agreement. In contrast, New Zealand saw a rise in US tariffs from 10% to 15%, prompting Trade Minister Todd McClay to stress the importance of direct talks with the US for future resolutions. Meanwhile, Taiwan has also been in tariff discussions, with US tariffs on Taiwanese goods previously set at 32%. Taiwan hopes for a reduction after further negotiations, with the final outcome critical to the island's export-driven economy and its global supply chain position. Across the Pacific, tensions are mounting in Mexico. US tariffs on Mexican goods remain at 25%, a figure linked to the United States, Mexico and Canada trade agreement. President Trump extended this deal for 90 days, aiming to finalize a new trade agreement with Mexico. Although Mexico has refrained from retaliating so far, President Claudia Sheinbaum says that she has threatened to impose higher tariffs on US goods if the situation escalates. Here's what she had to say.
Y bueno, se mantiene los aranceles para automotriz, aunque como ustedes saben hay un descuento para lo que tiene que ver con las partes fabricadas en Estados Unidos y México y Canadá también. Realmente México sigue siendo hoy, dentro de este nuevo orden mundial, porque es un nuevo orden comercial mundial, tenemos el mejor acuerdo posible, comparado incluso con las demás naciones. Es decir, el acuerdo que tenemos no implicó ninguna acción adicional por parte de México, sino sencillamente nos quedamos como estamos y seguimos platicando.
Now, meanwhile, France has expressed frustration over the 15% tariff increase imposed on European exports, which was part of a deal between Trump and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. French leaders have been vocal in their opposition, calling the arrangement unfair and detrimental to European trade interests. Let's listen in to what François Bayrou, the French Prime Minister, had to say about the tariff situation.
Nous avons assisté précisément à ce contre quoi l'Europe était construite, c'est-à-dire l'idée qu'une puissance aussi importante que les États-Unis peut décider que d'autres pays vont devoir se soumettre à sa loi. Ce n'est pas comme ça que les relations internationales doivent marcher. On doit tous ensemble définir ce que devrait être la loi idéale. Ce n'est pas l'injonction des uns et l'obéissance des autres. Pas comme ça que ça doit.
We're once again joined by Dr. Ajay Jua, Gautam Mukherjee and Dr. Sanjay Kumar on this. Gautam, I wanted to come to you first. Mexico was facing similar accusations from Trump that Canada was. This is why that he raised the tariffs on Mexican goods. However, Claudia Sheinbaum has taken a different approach to Mark Carney in this. That Carney has become off quite hostile towards Trump. That's what, after all, he won his election on, his approach. However, following a phone call between President Trump and Claudia Sheinbaum, the US president has announced a 90-day extension on tariffs. What are your thoughts on Donald Trump's strategy in dealing with countries in regards to something that is so significant on the global trade stage?
Well, it's pressure tactics through and through. And as the time goes on, I feel confident that ways will be found around this. Now, in the case of Vietnam, for example, the direct tariff is 20%, but there's a 40% tariff on third country re-exports. That means if the Chinese are sending their goods to Vietnam and Vietnam is re-exporting them, then there's 40% on those goods. Now, up to now, he hasn't done a cross-referencing of this kind of thing with countries, including India, that are not, basically channeling Chinese goods. But Canada is, Mexico is, or was, and therefore the tariffs have been raised very high. Plus, there is the accusation of drug running and people running from both the countries, which Trump wants to prevent, and is, that's why the tariffs are so high. Now, in India's case, I think negotiations are still on, 6 rounds of negotiations. That 6th round is about to happen in August. I think an interim agreement can come about. The imposition of this 25% is actually, today's news says, from the 7th. It comes into effect from the 7th of August. That seems to be the latest. Now, India could, where it's hurting India is not in terms of the overall GDP hit, which may be limited to 0.3 to 0.5%, which is not insignificant, but not, damaging to the extent that we are sunk. Having said that, the main sectors that are affected are gems and jewelry and textiles. The way out may be to send them to third countries, such as Britain, with whom we have now entered into an FTA, and there is no tax on what we send on these items in particular to the UK, and the UK can in turn export them to importers in the US. Similarly, UAE may be another target, and like this, there are many other countries which are not, which have FTAs with India and which are not sanctioned with high tariffs by America, nor have they been sanctioned with additional tariffs in case they channel other people's goods. UAE has for long been channeling Russian goods, both import and export. And really, America hasn't. I mean, this can get very complex.
Yes, indeed.
Will America get its way out and out? I don't think so. Pressuring so many countries at the same time, I don't know what other work he'll get done at this rate.
Yes, Gautam, thank you. I wanted to bring Dr. Jua in next. This is obviously being called a reciprocal tariff by the US president. Do you believe that now some of these tariffs have come to effect? As Gautam just said there, not all of them have yet, but most of them are due to come in on the 7th. Do you believe the US's reciprocal tariff strategy is effective in addressing these trade imbalances, or does it risk escalating trade tensions?
My reaction is somewhat mixed. The United States is doing all these things for two reasons. One, to earn revenue. President Trump has frequently talked about the US rates of import being very low or no import duty at all on, for instance, under the CUSMA from Mexico and Canada, and to earn revenue. By imposing these, he hopes that the finance bill which he's just got passed, the big beautiful bill, that whatever losses in extra expenditure occurs in such kind of his extravagance or sectarian kind of favors which he's passing out can get made up from the increased income from customs by these higher taxes. That's number one. And number two is that he is trying to sell an American dream of MAGA, that America can again become a great country. And the route which is chosen is the manufacturing route, which I think is at current juncture a rather tough one. If he had relied upon services, technology-based services and highly technical goods to manufacture, I could have said that's possible. But if you're getting into general manufacturing, including steel, aluminum, components,
Yes.
all kind of things, that's going to take a very long time, and that may not materialize, at least during his term, 3.5 years left of his second term. So my fear is that the president is upsetting in the process the whole global supply chain. And in that, he's impacting friends and foes alike.
Yes.
I don't know who is foe, whether China he considers as foe. As of last 10 days, Russia has become a foe. Earlier, President Putin was a great guy for him. Now, if so, it's all a very, if I could use a very simple term, hodgepodge around the world taking place. We don't know today's enemies, tomorrow's friends, and what's going to happen. So India is, as of 3 days or 2 days, we are no longer in his, favored category. He's called us one of, dumbest economy, etc., along with Russia's poor performers. But
Yes.
he does realize that we have a strategic value. We are partners, and there are the services exports to us of the US plus royalties which get American companies take, and the arms sales actually.
Okay, Dr. Ju, I'm really sorry. We're going to have a different. We're going to move on. Just stay on the topic of tariffs. However, now we're going to look at some global stock markets of countries most affected by these newly imposed tariffs. Global stock markets have, of course, slid as President Donald Trump's new tariffs rattles investors worldwide. As of last night, India's Sensex and Nifty 50 closed about 0.35% down, with textiles, pharma, gems and auto part exporters among the hardest hit. Across Asia, South Korea's Kospi sank 3%, Japan's Nikkei edged lower, and Hong Kong and Chinese indices extended their losing streaks. Taiwan's currency fell for a seventh session, pressured by 20 to 30% tariffs. In the US, the Dow closed 0.74% lower, with the S&P 500 off 0.37%, while European futures also pointed weaker. Commodity markets dipped, with oil down nearly 1% on global demand fears. Analysts warn export-driven economies face margin and job risks, while India's GDP growth could drop 0.2 to 0.4% if tariffs remain. Markets recovered some intra-trade losses on hopes of last-minute negotiations. However, risk appetite remains fragile as Trump's trade war ripples across the globe. Right now, we're going to switch over live to some live indices. We're going to start with TAIEX, which is, of course, Taiwan's indice here, which is down now today, 0.45 this session. This is, of course, after Donald Trump has not negotiated a trade deal with Taiwan, and they are facing a 20% tariff on that. We will now move on to Japan, who of course did negotiate a 15% tariff on US goods, 0.38% down, as we can see there, minus 154 points today, even given that negotiated trade deal with President Donald Trump. So we see some loss in confidence there in today's session. Next, we're going on to India, of course, Nifty 50, who has gone down 0.004% today. So not a huge loss in confidence there in today's session, despite the 25% tariff, which was announced by Donald Trump just a few days ago. We now move on to Sensex, India's other national index. We see actually a small gain there of 0.08% in today's session. Let's move on once again to the United States. Of course, we will see a loss of confidence in 0.74% in today's session. This is people obviously losing confidence in the US market. People fear the implications which this tariff is going to cause, fears of global instability, global trade instability here. We now move on finally to the NASDAQ index, which has dropped 0.034%. As we can see, some fluctuation there among countries, all facing different tariffs. Dr. Kumar, I wanted to come to you. Obviously, the world is waiting in anticipation for if any other trade deals get through. We've seen the stock market throughout this whole saga behave unpredictably here. What do you think the effect of this is going to be on global trade stability, all in all?
It is going to impact the geoeconomics in long run, and in current circumstances, microeconomic instability is there. That is why you are seeing some kind of effects in the stock markets across the globe. But big economies like India, China, Brazil, Russia, many countries are within EU, and a few in other parts of the world, including ASEAN, like Vietnam, I think these countries are not going to be affected worse. But situation is right now very vulnerable for some countries like, Syria, Laos, Myanmar. Just imagine, like a country like US is imposing 41%, 40% tariffs on these small economies, and they do not have very high per capita income as well. So this is not sending a good signal to the geopolitical geopolitical circles. So circles, as well as many countries who want to see a change in the world order. That is why it is not a good perspective. It is not a good signal in long run. And also for companies, critical technologies and critical minerals had been in the center for many countries, leading countries, and the big economies in the world. This is making many companies to think in a unique way and in a very strategic way to come up with products which is exclusive to them, so that they can deal with this kind of tariffs.
Yes,
so it is not a good news for many economies as well as the consumers, because
Yes.
many farmers are going to be affected and consumers will be in a vulnerable situation, and
Dr.
resulting